And stop. Okay. Good. And it should be picking up. Oh, look, it looks like it's picking up sound. All right. So we got a few minutes to wait so we can look at the news. Let me just organize my screen a little. All right. Good. There come people. So there's a big lawsuit over opioids. It has been coming out in all the news agencies a lot that there's these companies, and apparently Johnson & Johnson is part of it, that totally lied to the doctors and gave the doctors propaganda to lie to their patients to tell everybody it was perfectly great to take large doses of opioid and get addicted and killed. And now the chickens are coming home to roost. So one state sued, and they were expected, some people thought they would pay $2 billion to that one state, and therefore the total liability would be $100 billion, but they only lost $500 million. So that was 4 times less than expected, so their price stock went up. So this is the same thing happened to Facebook. You know, Facebook totally got busted for totally lying to everybody and selling personal data to the Russians so they could hack the election, or 2 companies would do it. And they thought they would get punished, but they only got $5 billion, which was so small that their price went up by more than $5 billion that day. In both cases, these were slaps on the wrist at this scale. Anyway, so we'll see, but there will be a whole lot more lawsuits behind this one, but apparently nobody's worried about it. They have enough money they made from all those opioids, they can totally pay the fine and just keep sailing along. So it's the American way. So anyway, Vitalik Buterin is the guy that invented Ethereum. Ethereum is the #2 cryptocurrency, and it is the difference between Ethereum and Bitcoin is that Ethereum allows you to write programs which run on the blockchain, which nobody on earth can understand. This is the way to make your program run 1 million times slower. Every step has to be reproduced on 1 million computers. And the end result is it's very, very slow, and it bogs down very easily. He's not admitting the entire blockchain is basically full. It's reached its limit of capacity. Most of us noticed this in 2017 when CryptoKitties filled up the Ethereum blockchain where you could not do anything, which is what happens to everything. And what he needs to do, which he admits here, is sharding. And one thing he didn't mention, which I have in my cryptography class, is Radix. Radix is the European blockchain from, I think, Britain, and this totally solves the problem. Radix blockchain. These guys, I've sharded, yeah, decentralized ledger technology. These guys have sharded it. The problem with Ethereum is if I spend some Ethereum, 1 million other computers have to do all the calculation involved in that transaction. But Radix creates shards. You take the last 64 bits of the address, and you only process transactions that match that. So you only process your transactions and a few other people's. And then instead of having 1 million copies for fault tolerance, they pick like 100 random machines to duplicate it so that they make sure you're not cheating, but they don't need to have 1 million times duplication. And so it's fine. And they proved it's incredibly fast. And they played the entire Bitcoin history of 10 years in like a few hours on their blockchain because it's much, much more efficient. And so that's sharding, and they've already got it going for that cryptocurrency. But this one is not publicly traded yet. It's still in like a beta test. But it certainly, I was very impressed with this. It actually solved the biggest problem with these things. Well, there's 2 huge problems with cryptocurrency. The first one is scaling, which they have solved. The second one they have not solved, which is there is in fact no use case. There's no reason for any of this junk to exist except for money laundering. And they haven't solved that problem, that there's actually no use for it, but nobody seems to care about that. Everyone seems to believe that there will be some awesome use and it'll all matter someday in the total lack of any proof. And I must say there have been a lot of previous technologies like this, like the PC. For the first 10 years, PCs were completely useless. And the enthusiasts said, oh, this will be great someday. And everyone said, you're totally wasting your time. And it did turn out to be great someday. So maybe there will be some killer app for the blockchain someday other than money laundering, but it hasn't happened yet. Anyway, let's see what else is fun. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
For the money laundering, is it still like at 30% be Bitcoin or through all those wallets like that?
Still what?
For the do you know anything about the laundering percentage on that? So they're money.
Oh, well, the point, well, I mean, money laundering, you typically accept like 5% through. Yeah. Bitcoin is essentially 100%. Yeah. That's the point. That's why it's so much better. I mean, there's money laundering. Organized crime does stuff like buy lottery tickets, and they only get 10% of the money back, and now it's clean money, and they accept that. Running it through Bitcoin or these is considered to completely launder it, especially through Zcash or Monero. Although not so much Bitcoin or Ethereum really, which are not really designed for privacy. Yeah. But so, I mean, in principle, you could run it through there and it would be very hard to track. Although actually there's something I wanted to show you. There's a company, I don't know if I can find it. There's a company that does de-anonymization of Bitcoin.
Oh, yeah, the forensics group.
Yeah, I've had a name for it. G analysis or something, chain analysis, that was it. I don't bring that up because this is actually very interesting to me because, you know, I'm actually interested in real finance and not crime. And so I'm interested in any product that will actually remove the crime out of it. And that's what these guys are, CipherTrace. They claim they will add tracking to the currency without breaking your anonymity. They'll add know your customer. The point they say they're going to clean up the blockchain. That's their game. And I don't understand how it works.
So how much more valuable is the blockchain if there is no criminal activity on it?
That is a very interesting, I mean, then I can answer that question experimentally. It's a very good question. When I first thought this happened to the #1 exchange, Coinbase in San Francisco. They're the best exchange and they're the most legal. They're very determined not to be crooks like all the rest. And so the FBI came to them about a year ago and they said, we have determined that anybody that buys Bitcoin at all is evading taxes. So we want your entire customer list. And they said, we're not going to do that. And so they compromised and they gave to the IRS their entire list of all the customers with more than $10,000 in transactions. And I thought everybody would leave and they would go broke, and that did not happen. So apparently, there are a significant number of people who are willing to invest in Bitcoin and just to get the proceeds and even willing to pay taxes. They're even willing for their transactions to be reported to the government the way they would with Visa and MasterCard. There apparently is some body of customers that are willing to use it for legal transactions, presumably because they're speculators and they want to ride the price going up. But anyway, I thought they would go broke for doing that. I know this happened to, was it Flickr? No, it was Tumblr. Tumblr was successful, and then they banned all the porn. And after that, the value fell to zero, and they sold for 0.1% of the price. Their only use case was porn, and without that, they had nothing. And I thought the only use of blockchains was crime, but apparently not. The speculators do form a market. Coinbase is still there. That surprised me. But anyway, these guys claim they are going to have rigorous anti-money laundering compliance, and they claim that they're going to clean up the blockchain and keep it legal. And I'm interested. I don't understand how that's possible, but they're trying to do it. And this, I think, is the point, because one thing that's been trying to do for years is to get Bitcoin on the New York Stock Exchange. They wanted to have an exchange-traded fund that invests in cryptocurrencies, and they've been unable to get it approved by the regulators because, like me, they're all bitter, sour financial professionals, and they say, you guys are a bunch of crooks, and I'm not putting you on my exchange. And I still feel that way because I used to do pyramid schemes under contract with the Federal Trade Commission, and it's very simple. If I give you money, what do I get? If I don't get anything, that's a pyramid scheme, and that's Bitcoin. If there was a product or a service that made some sense that I was getting, then that would be commerce. But if I don't get anything except the right to rip off other people, then that's a pyramid scheme. Anyway, so we'll see what comes of it all. They're trying to make a proper legal status for cryptocurrencies, and it might happen. And there's an incredible number of people, especially in Europe, that vigorously believe that cryptocurrencies are the future and they'll do something awesome that other forms of money cannot do. And I see them all the time, and not one of them convinced me at all. I don't understand why anybody would do it when they could just use Visa and MasterCard, which are safer and better from almost everything you want to do, unless you're breaking the law. But there's a large body of people that believe that getting the government out of your money is awesome, and we need to do that. Anyway, so it came out that supposedly at some meeting, Trump recommended nuking hurricanes to shut them down. And just like buying Greenland, this makes happy comedy for the liberal press. But in both cases, this is not completely stupid. Many people have proposed to buy Greenland. Many previous presidents have. This comes from the Monroe Doctrine, that we should own this entire hemisphere and we should own all the neighboring countries and control them, just like the Soviets, just like the Chinese, because we want to have a buffer so nobody can put missile sites in there. And so anyway, he isn't buying Greenland yet, but people are saying, you know, you shouldn't just laugh about it. That would not be a bad idea, especially because global warming is going to get the ice off, and there's going to be a ton of mineral wealth in Greenland that nobody has been able to exploit because the ice was in the way. And killing hurricanes with bombs has been proposed before. Apparently, all the meteorologists say it won't work. It's not that it's a totally stupid idea, but it won't work. And in fact, if you did just set off a nuke in a hurricane, all you'd have is now a radioactive hurricane, make it worse than before. But, you know, people have suggested it with various kinds of bombs that couldn't you do something. And what they say is the amount of energy in a hurricane is already greater than a nuclear bomb anyway. So it's like throwing a rock in the Grand Canyon. Of course, all that means is you need a bigger bomb. But anyway.
Yeah, we would have to understand the full extent.
What's that?
Wouldn't you have to understand the full power and extent of a hurricane?
You would think so, yes. But another thing people have proposed is seeding the clouds to make it rain or warming up the water. Those are things that have been considered, but none of them are practical. Okay, the amount of any of those that you could do is not enough to stop a hurricane yet. But many people suggested this, and apparently it's not a good idea, but it's not quite as stupid as they're making it sound. People are making fun of Trump. These things have been proposed before by other people. They're not completely nuts. This one I thought was pretty good. IoT products. And
we expected to read through all of this, right?
What's that?
We expect to read through all this article, right?
No, you don't have to read through them. I just put them here for anybody who's interested. You are not required to read through them. I do, but I don't necessarily expect anybody else to. Here's a couple more that are kind of interesting. So this company went and got all the firmware for all the IoT products they could find, and they tested it. And what they discovered is that their updates just make it worse. As you would expect, the IoT security community is famous for being very insecure because, of course, people just make more and more gadgets and they just want them to have more and more features, and nobody really cares about the security of home gadgets like webcams or anything. So they find they're most likely going to remove the advanced security features more often than add them, and so on. Within a 15-year data set, nobody had making their stuff more secure at all, and I think that's true of every part of IT. In the early days, all they care about is availability. They just want to make more of it faster, cheaper, better, so it runs faster. Nobody cares about security until later, and later hasn't really come yet for the IoT. I think it's beginning to come now where people are beginning to wonder how secure their devices are, but realistically, there isn't going to be any security in IoT until people are actually willing to pay a little more money for a secure product. So anyway, that they've got chapter and verse to prove it. This one is another amazing thing, like parallel construction. Parallel construction is something I can't believe. The NSA obtains information about crime with national security letters and with wiretaps that are not illegal under American law. And then they want to tell the FBI so they can prosecute people. So what they do is they hand over to the FBI evidence that has been obtained illegally, and the FBI makes a fictional story about how they got it from an informant or something who does not exist, and then they present it in court as evidence. And this has been happening for years and apparently passing legal tests, which I do not understand at all. They lie about where the evidence came from and introduce it and get away with it. And here's more. Apparently this has been going on for years. They had a suspect who had tattoos on his face. And then they claim that the person who did the crime had like something covering their face. So they go in Photoshop, remove the tattoos, and then they give this picture to someone in a lineup. And apparently they've been doing this all along. They take modified pictures and put that in a lineup to recognize the criminal. And they don't even tell the jury or the judge about this. They just say they picked this person, the victim picked them out of a lineup when this is what they call a lineup. And apparently this is standard police procedure, and it only recently came out that they've been doing this all along. That's why, an awful lot of police and forensic procedures are pretty horrifying when you find out what they're doing. Anyway, hopefully they will change something about that, but who knows. Anyway, we're up to the official time here. So I've got two plans today. We are here in 160, and what I'm planning to do is talk about the chapter 2 in the book a bit. I'm probably not going to get as far, I'm probably not going to finish the entire half of the chapter, we'll see. And then I want to talk a little bit about China. Like I say, I try to mix the official certification for a security manager with the color from political events, because I think there's two different ways to go here. Some people might want the CISM certification, and other people might be more interested in the political side. And I think from our point of view, they're both valuable. So I'm going to start with the content from the book. So that is chapter 2A here. Okay. And so here we go, information security governance. And this is the first half of the chapter, split the chapter in half. So we're going to cover these topics, what security governance is, and go down to the business model for information security, BMIS, which is the ISACA framework to explain how to manage security. And then next time, or whenever we get to the second half, there's another whole bunch of stuff about how you develop a security strategy. So governance is the process where senior management controls what you do. I've always had sort of an intuitive grasp of this just from working in business and seeing how it works, but they're trying to reduce it to a science. Now, this reminds me of the pen testing framework where you try to take hackers and reduce it to a science. It's pretty inexact, sort of like psychology. You try to make a model with graphs and charts and lists of things, and it's not really beautiful and mathematically pure or anything. It's an attempt to organize the processes. So you have policies and objectives and monitoring, and the point here is basically always the same. You want to have upper management that knows what your company is doing in a general, what the main goal is. Then you have middle management to develop specific details of how that's going to be accomplished. And then you have workers underneath them that implement that. And then you have some kind of measurement to see how well it's working so you can continuously improve. That's the basic structure that you have here. So this is information security governance. And so you're going to manage your personnel, you want to manage the risk, you want to control the configuration of your devices, how you change the devices, and the access of your devices. That be limitation on who's allowed to get to things. And so your key processes are vulnerability and incident management and business continuity planning, which certainly is a well-known thing for all of us from Security Plus and CISSP. This is what distinguishes a professional large company that is ready to play on the big stage from amateur mom and pop business. Half the businesses in America do not have any business continuity plan. Their plan is if a disaster happens, like the building burns down, they'll just give up and quit and cease to exist. This is a typical mom and pop restaurant. Bad thing happens, they just give up and go out of business. And that's okay for small businesses, but you will never be able to play on a big stage and make big contracts with government and corporations and promise to keep supplying things for 5 years. You won't be a big player until you grow out of that and you have business continuity management, where you plan how will we survive if our key employees quit, if the building burns down, if our computers crash, if we get hacked. You have a plan to survive these things, and you have insurance at alternate locations and plans for alternate personnel and buildings. That's what distinguishes the big professional corporations from small amateurs that are just at the bottom of business pyramid. So that's the game here. And so as you move to be more professional, you have to have a clear organization structure that plans for a lot of these things. So you're going to monitor processes, and you're going to have continuous improvement where you try to fix the areas in which you are failing to achieve your objectives. So you have a vision at the very top. This is a grand scheme of why your company exists, like a mission statement. Google's mission is to index all the world's information. You have a grand statement like that of what you're doing. Then you have strategies and objectives and an IT strategy. And then you have a security policy and standards and processes to do all these things. And then you have metrics, which measure how well you have achieved your goals. And then you have feedback, going back up to the higher levels, so you readjust things at a higher level to compensate for whatever is not really working that well. And that is a closed loop, and you must have a closed loop because it keeps changing. The environment keeps changing. IT keeps having new things. And so even if what you had is working perfectly today, it won't be working perfectly in a month or two. So you have to constantly keep reevaluating and adjusting things to keep up with the changing landscape.
How do you feel about city structures, city technology in their network?
Well,
they have to pay ransomware because they can't afford IT.
Yes.
They're not considered small business.
Well, yes, government sector is famously far, far behind private business. Government is, for example,
small business, worse than small business.
No, not worse than small business, but worse than big business. Corporations are way ahead. Yeah. Small city governments are typically way behind, like below the average of medium business probably, and even national government is way behind. This is a big issue. For example, the military has defined their compliance standards several years ago, and they've done audits, and they found that 95% of their systems are out of compliance. That's the best they've ever achieved. Because they don't have the resources, everybody has the same problem. They don't have the money, their staff is not trained, they don't have the right equipment. What they've got is a sprawling mess of old junk imperfectly connected together, and only the largest corporations that really have a lot of money coming in can actually afford to achieve compliance with these major standards. It's a problem.
Like as FBI has the same problem. Once they share their information with city government, that's how they get hacked, right?
Well, I think that's true, and that's why the FBI is famous for never handing out any information. Information flows into an investigation, and they will never tell you anything because they don't trust any of you to keep a secret. That's why police have a general hostility towards the FBI.
So that false flag on TV, they represent, FBI shares with city government, and they have limited access to what they can look up in the FBI database.
I think that is largely a fiction. Because they know they can't trust the city government. This is, for example, all the national security meetings that the president has, they can't tell Congress because Congress will totally leak it out.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, right, so you got objectives. This is something you're trying to achieve. You got strategies, which are how you're going to achieve it. Then you have policy, which is the rules you will follow to get there. And then you have priorities, which is where the security staff usually gets very frustrated, because your typical security professional has one thing they understand, like encryption, and they feel like you should improve your encryption, and they go and scream and yell about it, and the management couldn't care less about your encryption. They have other priorities, and either rightly or wrongly, they usually do not understand what the security guy is going on about, and this leads to a big conflict. So you'll have standards. These are your choices of exactly which products to use and which levels of encryption and so on. And then you have processes, which are instructions to tell people our way of doing things. You must do it this way. And then you have controls, which are things that make people obey the rules, some kind of restriction, like locks on doors, access controls, and so on, to make it so people have to do what they're supposed to do instead of doing things wrong. Then you're going to have management of your program and your project. And then you will have metrics and reporting, where you have to measure how well you've succeeded and have an official report on a periodic basis going back up the structure, so that the management understands what has happened. I got involved in this 20 years ago when I was working at an escrow agency to settle lawsuits. And I was very interested, because I'd pretty much done every part of the business in my years working there, and my boss understood every step, and he started making a complete record of everything we'd done, because customers would call him with a new lawsuit, and he could tell them how much it was going to cost. And that was amazing to me, because he really understood exactly how much every step took, and he could compare it to a previous case. And I was helping him develop standard reports like this, which I saw the value, and he was right. You really need to have a report that says exactly what did you do at every step, and how long did it take, and how much did it cost. That's very valuable, and it's not easy at all to do this. Getting the work done is one thing. Actually adding it all up and understanding exactly how it all got done, how many staff it took, how much time it took, is another thing. And that's the difference between amateur business and a really professional business, where you can answer questions like, and he would do things like take on a new case which was so big that it would double the entire size of the company. And he would tell them how much it would cost and how long it would take, and he would rent new buildings, new servers, new staff, and he would make it all happen. And that's what you can do if you really know how to run your business. And that's good management, and you don't see that very often when you can handle a thing like that. So you need governance. So your organization needs your IT systems working, and of course you want to run confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That's security, but there's a different balance for everybody. You cannot just say, focus on one of these and ignore the rest, and you can't say what you should do. And in fact, what usually happens is companies start by just getting availability, and they don't care about anything else. This is where the IoT space is. They just want to make stuff fast and make it cheap and make it work well enough, and they don't really care if there's some defects in it and if it's not very safe. That's not the current concern. The current concern is to roll out a lot of product to market fast and get some sales. Only later, after you've achieved some availability, do you then think, well, maybe we ought to do something about the defects and something about the security problems. But the first aspect of security is availability. So your company will change which one of these you're focusing on as it moves forward. And every company is different. That's why you need human staff. There is no such thing as perfect security. Security is when you have balanced these things correctly for your business goals. And that is changing as time passes. Like Facebook, his big thing was move fast and break things, because all they wanted was availability of new features. And now they're beginning to see the time to pay the piper, where their security problems are getting so bad that it's actually costing them money. So they're going to have to start paying more attention to doing things like actually protecting the privacy of their customers. So you got risk management, where you try to figure out what bad things might happen and how much harm they're going to do you. And then you have some attempt to improve your processes, and you try to identify attacks and failures of incidents, and then have an incident response process to cope with them. So then you have, of course, compliance with laws, regulations, and standards, and it depends on what business you're in, how many of these things apply to you. And as I mentioned before, you have planned for business continuity and disaster recovery. If something bad happens, how will you survive it? And then you've got metrics. You have a whole task here of measuring all the things that might go wrong, violations, auditing people, training people, measuring to what extent they are doing what they should be doing, and how many failures there are. Then you have to allocate your resources, and if you do have proper security governance, then you will have better IT governance, better trust from everybody, and a better reputation. And this is part of how you achieve maturity as a company, where you have the features that smaller and more amateurish companies don't have. And let me hit the mute on this thing. All right, because there's always somebody with their mic on. All right, so anyway, all right, so that's the goal. So business alignment means your security program will make the company work. This is something that I've seen happen in the hacking community in the last 5 years. 8 or 9 years ago, almost all the hacking conferences were full of a new attack, and everybody's an idiot for not patching for this new attack. And over the last 5 years, they said, you know, we're just part of business. I'm watching. So there's been some talk about moving our department over to the business department. And I don't know if that's the right move for political reasons, but I always felt that is what we really do here. This is not science. We don't have a hypothesis and an experiment and discover a new principle. This is business. We're just figuring out how to use this stuff to run a business. And I feel like we belong in a business department, and all of IT security has figured this out. We're just part of business. It's not like we're this special.
Expense.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. But I mean, we can't just be an expense. We got to be contributing something to the business. We're no different than quality testing and customer support and designing a new product. Another function is securing their product. It's just another way to make a better product to sell and please the customers and make more money. We're really just another division of the business, and therefore we should understand how we tie into the real business. How is it that what we do makes the business more successful? If it is just something that doesn't make the business more successful, then they should just get rid of us. And I think we're done pretending anything else. We don't have some sacred purity to our mission. We're no different than anybody that figures out how to advertise better or put a better label on the box or something. So that's the game. It has to fill into business. So here's things that determine your business. You have a culture, you have some assets, and you have some tolerance for risk. Then you have some legal obligations, and you have some market conditions, like what your customers want, what your competitors are doing. And those are the things you have to think about. The old-fashioned rule of security was Dr. No. They would just always say, oh, no, you can't do that, you can't do that. You can't use your cell phone at work. You can't have another server. You have to use our existing lousy server. You can't have this, you can't have that.
No public Wi-Fi.
Yeah, no public Wi-Fi. And this is what everyone did. The old security people were just always in the way of everything. So what everybody does is just get around them. And that's why one thing that I heard a lot at security conferences 5 or 6 years ago is your IT department thinks they're controlling servers, but you haven't looked at your Amazon bill. How many books do you think people are buying? All the departments would just rent Amazon servers and run business services on there without participation of IT, because that way they'd escape this. So now you're worse off than ever. Now you have amateurs running servers. They aren't patching them. They're putting company data on them. It's not being subject to your controls. This is like what Hillary Clinton did. She ran her own email server, which was not under the control of the government, so it was not meeting the legal requirements for archiving of government data and being control of the IT team. Now, this is what people do when the existing infrastructure is so lousy that they can't stand it. This is what I've done for this course. I had a student ask me at the beginning of the course, are you on the City College campus server? I say, hell no, the official City College campus server is useless. I have to go to a separate one, not approved by the college, not controlled by the college, and I'm putting student data on there. Now, if they knew what was going on around here, they would probably try to stop me from doing that. But they don't, because there's no actual management of this college at all. But anyway, this is just what happens. I've gone to do something totally out of their control, which is what happens when you don't provide stuff people need. And I'm doing it. This is just what happens. It's okay here because there's no consequences for violating management. But anyway, in principle, there could be. Now, the main reason I do it, by the way, is it's technically a face-to-face class. Therefore, it's not officially an online class. If it was officially an online class, I would actually have to use their server and obey a whole bunch of painful, onerous rules, which I'm not obeying. Which is why my classes are all technically face-to-face, although you can totally attend them online if you like. But anyway, so you have goals and objectives, you have a risk appetite, which determines how much risk you're going to take. Now, most companies don't explicitly define their risk appetite, but financial companies often do because they're very strict. One of my students got a job at a company that did investment, and they said, we only have a small number of customers. You can't even join us unless they have like $100,000 or $1 million to invest, and we handle them one by one. And they say, our entire network is off the internet. There's no connection at all. There's just one Mac in the break room you can use to read your email on the break, but it's not connected to the network at all because we can't afford to get hacked, and we don't need it to be efficient or anything. You're happy to do things by hand, one by one, and that's one way to go, and that's risk averse. They're not willing to take any risk at all of being hacked, And they're willing to pay a considerable price, inconvenience, and worker hours to get that. Facebook is the opposite. Here's the posters, real posters from Facebook. Move fast and break things. What would you do if you weren't afraid? Facebook's whole thing is roll out new features fast, fast, fast. Don't worry if it messes something up. Don't worry if it's unsafe. Don't worry if it breaks up some other process. Just get it out there fast, 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 because all those happy Facebookers just want to see a new thing. And who cares if it breaks something? That's their philosophy. And of course, they made a ton of money that way. They are correct that their vast customer base just wants new, exciting features, and they really don't care about the details.
Is there a whole list of like how many times they can hack, how many flaws there are? Is there like a yellow
No, I
pages
have
for the
no.
worst things of Facebook?
No, I haven't seen it. But what we do know is how many times they betrayed their customers. About 10 times they have broken all their promises. Originally, Facebook was only going to share
Privacy.
Yes, they were only going to share your face with people at the same college. Then they were only going to people within a few colleges. Then it was only going to be people in a town. Then it was going to be only people you approved. And over again, they just violated the rules and exposed people's data further and further, because they have learned, like Spirit Airlines is the same. Spirit Airlines is the cheapest airplane, and they treat you like dirt. They charge like $25 for a carry-on bag or something. The seats are incredibly tiny. They give you nothing. And you get a ton of complaints. And the CEO says, yeah, they complain, and then they come back. The only thing they really care about is the price. And Facebook knows that they can do anything to you, and you will come back, because you have your funds on there, and they can treat you like dirt and betray your trust over and over again. And it's still going on. This fine they got for the hack of the election was so small that they're just rolling ahead without a change. They have not yet hit an actual limit of how this philosophy will go.
Is there a blacklist for them, like the 100 worst customers? All the stuff that they posted was a virus to Facebook, and it ran on their server.
Well, it's funny you say that. I read it just today. There is a group of people who have been kicked off Facebook, and they can't find out why, and they can't get back on. They do have like a do not fly list at Facebook, and a bunch of people are on it, and they even detect when they make a new account and they're still blocked off, and they can't get an answer from anybody. But they have an increasing number of people that are no longer welcome on Facebook, and they're very disgruntled, and they cannot get any answer from anybody about why. But I think it's because, just like Twitter, they're rolling out things to try to respond to the political climate that wants them to block things. So they're defining some kind of internal list of bad things. And once you're flagged by the robot as having done too many bad things, you're toast. And there's no human in the loop to appeal to. And their algorithm is, of course, not very accurate. So it's kicking off people who really didn't do anything that bad. But that's the same thing. I got kicked off YouTube. One of my videos was taken down for being a hacking video, and I complained there was nobody to hear. Then they kicked off some other people. They finally kicked off somebody that was important, and then they had a scandal, and they put us back. But, you know, they could have done that. And this is what you do when you use a free service. You use a free service, you are the product. You are not the customer. You have no expectation of service. I was thinking I'd have to go to Vimeo or something. I didn't pay them anything. They can totally nuke me at any time for no reason and ignore me complaining. That's why it's unprofessional to base your business on a free service. I'm doing it because my customers I talked to, they said, we need YouTube. YouTube is so great. It has to speed up and slow down and the transcribing. We want all those features, and you won't get that on Vimeo. And I said, well, then I'll keep using YouTube. But I am aware that this is an unprofessional thing to do. If there was a way to pay a monthly fee to get guaranteed service from YouTube, I would like to do that. It is really unprofessional to base an important business function on a free service. And people find out all the time how much you're doomed because they can just pull the plug and you have no legal right to complain. They didn't promise me anything. They gave me something for free. When they're tired of giving it to me, they can totally stop, and I got not a leg to stand on. Anyway.
You know how much storage you're using for YouTube?
A ton. I must have, I think I have like 400, I think I have like 400 videos up there, and I don't have backups of it all.
You gonna back it up?
No, hell no, because it all goes bad. No, I'm just doing what everybody else does. I'm living on the melting. I'm living on the melting ice. I'm living on the melting ice flow. If they pull the, no, I can't, because I don't think it matters. I think it's all useless after a year or so. I'll just record the new stuff. Who wants to watch my old videos anyway? How much of a masochist are you? I don't know who's watching the new ones. I record these things. 200 people watch it in a week. I would never watch this stuff. An hour-long lecture? You got to be kidding. I want to. Anyway, but there are some people watching it. Anyway, so, all right, so you got roles and responsibilities. You got people like IT auditors and engineers and people at various levels. Everybody in a company will have a specification of what they're supposed to be doing. This, by the way, is one fun thing about the college. The college is usually a counterexample of all management. When we had a big accreditation crisis about 7 years ago, they actually paid someone to inspect the colleges process, and they went to people in management, like the board of trustees, and they asked them, like, what is your job? And not one of them had any idea what they were supposed to be doing. Which they don't have a job description like this. You know, it's just, this place is, government is typically the worst example of proper planning and organization and everything. People typically don't really know who their boss is. There's no real performance review or anything. Anyway, so they got ranks from supervisor and manager and director up to vice president and chairman, board of directors and stuff. There's give you some measure of how much power you supposedly have. In a proper corporation, you actually have power. In a college, there's no power at all. The people running this place have no control over anything. Faculty have tenure like me. They can just do or say anything. You can't do anything to them. It's the opposite of a power structure like this, where people, the boss, actually control things, which frustrates the accreditation body. They come to us and say, you must do these 3 things by next year. Then they come back next year. Did you do any of that? Hell no. Everyone just ignored me when I told them to do that. And they didn't do any of that. They say, what is this nonsense? It's like negotiating with terrorists. There is actually no authority structure that can make a promise and live up to it. It's a kind of crazy system.
Now, what grade would you give FEMA?
Well, I know some of my students are now working at FEMA, and you can get a job there. I don't know. I don't know how effective they are. I know they seem to pretty much mess up in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico was pretty much a disaster. I don't know.
Well, they couldn't count how many people lived and how many people died.
They just left the water sitting someplace and nobody got it. I think they're like every other government agency. They're a model of disaster and inefficiency. But you can get a job there. Anyway, so all right, so you have specific responsibilities, and then you'll have specific responsibilities of your position, like, you know, maintain the network or something. And then all the employees have general responsibilities, like they have to understand the security policy and conform to the rules of ethics and behavior. Everybody has to have that. And so you can have these RACI charts, where you have something that has to be done. There's someone responsible to actually do the work. There is someone accountable who is their supervisor to make sure they did the work. And then there are people who are consulted and people who are informed about it in case it might matter to them. But the person responsible actually has to do the work, and the person accountable is actually responsible for making sure the work is done correctly. And those other people are just included in case somehow it affects them. So that's a common kind of chart. You can make it this way, and you can make it this way, where people get one of these roles, and you have all your various roles. You say who's responsible, who's consulted, who's accountable. This is a very common situation, and I was very surprised when I started teaching at colleges, because I came from the private sector. So I would do work, and then it would be reviewed by somebody who was accountable for it. So they put me in a classroom, I started teaching, and I said, wait a minute, I assume they're going to hand me a midterm and a final exam, make sure I'm teaching the right stuff, and that totally did not happen. I'm like, wait a minute. Isn't there some management that inspects your work to see if you're doing it right? And there totally is not. The department chair sat in for like 10 minutes in one of my lectures, and that was it. And I asked them, how do you know? And they said, oh, you know, we noticed after a few years if your students don't know anything. And I said, well, I was sort of hoping for more accountability than that, but I guess that's how it works. It's a very strange situation. Anyway, so here's things you might consider. People have to have skills to do their job. You have segregation of duties. There are a lot of things that cannot be done by just one person. They're too important. They have to have 2 people work together, so you have to include that in your chart. And there are conflicts of interest. Like if you're going to approve your own privileges, that's no good. It has to be somebody else approving what you're doing, so that at least 2 pairs of eyes have looked at something. And that's a conflict of interest if you can do 2 things that if you are overseeing your own work. And these things happen at small, disorganized businesses, but at more professional corporations, you don't let those things happen, because after you've been around for a while, you learn that everybody does bad things. They make mistakes, they lie, they steal, they pull tricks, they cheat in various ways. And once you grow up and realize that that is going to happen, unless you have controls to prevent it, you must have controls so nobody can get away with something. There is somebody else monitoring what they're doing. That's the goal.
Actually, you've got the 2-factor. One is students write reviews that fill out a piece of paper, and 2, teacherreview.com.
There are reviews, and they have no consequences. But you're correct. In principle, there could be reviews. That'd be performance reviews.
Yeah, students still write paper, I think. They
do, but they have no effect, and they never vary either. Anyway, so I had some Kahoots. Let me bring them in. This should be in my favorites.
When you reach the maximum Kahoot.
I haven't yet, but it certainly could happen. And so it's randomizing. Life is good. Okay, so have some Kahoots.
I don't know. You could stop the video and then record the Kahoot separately.
I could, but I'm not interested. Yeah. Yes, there's a guy that commented on my video and said, you should like organize it all by topic and make a playlist. And I said, yeah, that would be nice. I'm not going to bother, but it would be nice. I could have like a media department cleaning this up and make it nicer, and that might be swell. And you know, if there may come a time when that happens, but right now it's on a as-is basis. However, I encourage people to ask for things that should be better. I really want to hear it. I'm probably not going to do it all, but I would like to hear what should be better. And sometimes there's something people tell me I can fix.
Find a copycat and try to pretend to someone else.
I'm not aware of any copycats lately. Back in 2011, 2012, I had a few.
You said someone pretended to be you. You never figured
Oh yeah, someone pretended to be you on the Cahoots. That's true. Somebody won the Cahoots last week as Kirk. So you could. That's why the Cahoots are extra credit. There's a bunch of weird things you could totally give your points to someone else. There's a bunch of weird things you could do. So the Cahoots are extra credits because they're not very professional, but they hopefully keep you from falling asleep. I guess we'll go with 16. I'll wait a few more seconds. All right, let's do this. Okay, so what part of business measures how effective your policies are? Okay, those are your metrics. All right. What's the most important aspect of security? Right, it varies. It's not as simple as one being right. It depends on your business circumstance. It varies from time to time, process to process. That's why you need intelligent humans driving the ship, making the correct balance. What's the A in RACI? That's accountable, all right? That's the person who manages, the person responsible for doing the work. The accountable person is supposed to make sure they're doing their work right. All right. And what principle prevents an asset owner from controlling his or her own access permissions? That's a conflict of interest. You can't give yourself more access without asking someone else. That's a conflict of interest. You naturally want more access. Food is winning. I think I know who that is. Let's see, I should be able to find a document to put this on. Good, okay. All right, food and MDOT. Food is you, eh? I thought so, okay. I know who food is. I know who MDOT is, but I don't know who CAP is. They'll have to tell me who they are if I want to get your CAP. Okay, good.
Chris Capito.
Okay, good. All right, good. That's good enough. Good. And this is CNIT 160. And it's chapter 82619. Let me just save this somewhere. 160 Cahoots. All right, good. So we got 20 minutes yet. I think we can go through one more of these and then I'll probably talk about something else. So you got a board of directors. These are the people that are ultimately in charge of a corporation. And they have a fiduciary duty, which is the purpose of a corporation is to make money for the shareholders. Now, by the way, last week, a new giant rule was being passed changing this. because this is ultimately what leads to all the evils of capitalism that the hippies and everybody have been getting mad about for 50 years, that all the corporations care about is making money for the shareholders, and they don't mind abusing the employees and trampling the earth and everything. And they're beginning to think they really should have something else other than just making more money for the stockholders as their only goal. But that is the way it has typically been, for better or worse. That led to our current capitalist system. Well, PG&E doesn't have stockholders. PG&E is kind of crazy. It's a government entity. That's why PG&E is very bizarre. They're going to go bankrupt because they have to pay a huge fine, and they're just going to raise our rates to pay for the fine. So it kind of makes no sense at all, and that's why the whole corporate structure doesn't really make sense for the government side. It kind of, it's hard to understand what profit would be over there. They can tax us more and have more profit, and what does that mean? Anyway, so you'll have people on the board of directors that represent the investors, have enough experience, have access to resources, and so on, and the board of directors appoints the chief executive officer, who will express their desires and define policies to make it happen. So the directors, for cybersecurity, which is a new thing, board of directors are generally focused only on making money, and the whole executive, but now cybersecurity is so important, so they've now talked about how you really should have cybersecurity built in your company, and they should understand the legal consequences. They should hire people that actually have cybersecurity expertise and set an expectation that people should consider cyber risks and so on. This is the modern security company. Many corporations are just in the infancy of accepting this, of course, because their real job is like to make cookies or something. And a bunch of them don't understand why they should care about cybersecurity. But now I think more and more of them are realizing even if all you do is make cookies, you still need to care about cybersecurity these days. So the executive management carries out the directives from the board of directors, starting with the CEO, and then you'll have people like the chief information officer, chief technical officer, chief information security officer underneath them, focusing on these parts of the company. And then the management ratifies the corporate security policy, and then they lead by example, and they're ultimately responsible for it. The CEO is responsible for the real success of the company. So you might have a security steering committee that will do things like evaluate risks assessments and consider security incidents and laws and try to steer you into an appropriately secure posture. You have business processes and business assets, and those have owners who are the people responsible for maintaining them, and those are typically non-technical people. Then below them, the responsibilities are to make sure that these things are correctly controlled, and they will then hand that off to a custodian who actually does the work. Now here you have one of the huge problems. The owner of something, this is why one thing I've spent years doing is Android app audits. Android apps are incredibly terrible. Android apps from major financial companies like banks are incredibly insecure and terrible. And I wonder why. And the answer is, in my opinion, although I cannot prove it, that the owners of the app, the responsible party, is not technical, and they don't understand anything about encryption or app security or coding or anything, and they hand it off to a custodian to write the app, and they don't audit their work because they don't feel competent. So the non-technical manager is not able to effectively supervise the errors made by the technical staff. And the technical staff, I know this from my personal experience, in many cases, the technical staff is incapable of understanding the responsibilities they're causing. There was a situation at the college where someone published all the student enrollments in every course available for everyone to see. And that is a violation of federal law. There's a federal privacy law that they were violating. And I contacted the person who put up that page and said, take it down, and they totally ignored me. Contacted that person's supervisor, and they totally ignored me. And I realized you have to go up to the C level. I had to go up to like almost the chancellor before I get somebody that would care. And at that time I was frustrated, but I learned this is the case at all the major corporations too. When I found a problem at Schwab, I couldn't get anyone to care until I contacted the CEO directly on Twitter. It is an interesting issue. To me, this is obvious, but I think I've always been attuned to business management. An average technical person is completely happy writing a clever bit of code, and they don't know or care that they're steering the entire company off a cliff. They just didn't see any problem with violating federal law with their app. They said, it's working fine, just shut up and go away. Because they only see what's on their desk. And the corporate people that can understand things like you have to obey the law or they'll shut us down are so non-technical they can't understand what you're talking about. It's a problem. And this is why there's a sweet spot for people like us, people that get certified as CISSPs and CISMs and stuff. We are going to be the people who can bridge the technical and management side. Typically, your technical side is fantastically irresponsible as far as management decisions. All they think is, I'm going to show how clever I am. like the atomic scientists in World War II that made a nuclear bomb. And then when they set it off, they freaked out, oh my God, you killed people, you monsters. Who could have seen this coming? They couldn't see it coming. And this is not that they're stupid. This is the natural people that are focused on the technical bits and all the beautiful details. Something about that distracts them from thinking about the actual big consequences of what they're doing. And the big thinkers aren't down there. We need someone in the middle to bridge that gap, and that would be us. That's part of why we have these technical people doing a management course. If you can understand both management and technical, you will be very, very valuable. Yeah.
I think the reason why I don't pay attention is probably because they're working on the project and projects, can I do this? And then it's kind of like, well, try, can I do this? So
Yes.
why, when you take when you get objectively, who cares what the context is? The problem is, can I do this? And then you just do it.
Yes.
And the big guys don't have the patience to like understand it because they're not interested in understanding it. They just know how to use it.
Well, this is closely related to another thing, which is what I was talking to a Department of Justice official who should be giving us a guest lecture here. I was talking to him at B-Sides. I mean, this is the standard. Hackers do stuff. They make some exploit. Then the government prosecutes them, and they're like, what? I didn't do anything wrong. And I remember I asked him, I said, how is it that the guy that made Silk Road, Ross Ulbricht, got a life sentence? And other hackers typically get like 18 months. He said, oh, that was because of the drugs. And I was floored. Oh, the drugs? I didn't even think about the drugs. I was just thinking about the technical stuff. But drugs are considered a huge, huge problem. The fact that he was helping people get drugs, he got a life sentence for that. That's what bothered them. I had not thought of that at all. And this is the thing. Your technical people are thinking of them in one way, and the management people are thinking in a totally different way. And it's tough to bridge that gap. And that's what we want to do here. So custodians are the people we are aware of, people with Cisco certification and coders and everything. These are the people that are doing things, actually maintaining the technical stuff, but they're implementing the policies from the owner, hopefully. Unfortunately, what they're typically doing is whatever they want to do, and the owner doesn't understand. But that is not healthy. It would be better. The owner should know enough to audit. This is what I've been trying to say, is that the non-technical supervisors at companies should be aware if their Android app is insecure. And they should fix it. And they should not be feeling like they have to understand the details of the code to do that. But anyway, it does seem to be the case that they don't. So here's a fine example. Equifax got hacked. So the CEO went before Congress and blamed his IT guy. Now, this is garbage. Your IT guy did not put on the patch. That is absolutely true. But the CEO is responsible. And if it doesn't get put on, it is his fault, because it was his job to hire competent staff, train them, hire enough staff, audit their work, and make sure it's done. If the staff doesn't do the work, you can fire them. But the CEO is still responsible. Your job is to make sure that your staff has enough training, enough time, enough.
I thought it was one of the CTO, technical officer.
It would be the CEO is overseeing the CTO, and the CTO is overseeing the asset owner, and the asset custodian is doing it. And there's supposed to be a chain of command where every layer is managed by the layer above them, and the ultimate person who answers for everything is the CEO. They say, how did you permit your high-level staff and your intermediate staff and your low-level staff to do this rotten thing? It was your job to make sure that there was a machine operating correctly here, so things are being checked and verified, and it's ultimately your failure that did this. I used to not understand this, how some of the top.
Wasn't mentioned, right, at any time during this inquisition.
What's that?
Pen test, the words pen test was not mentioned during this. Like,
well, that's true. And unfortunately,
right?
It seems in our modern system that CEOs just get a golden parachute and sail away being free of responsibilities. But that is certainly not the way it should
that
work.
wasn't asked, right?
Yeah, that's what seems to happen, but it's not right. So CISO is the highest ranking security person, and there are similar jobs like chief security officer and such. They develop security strategies. And so they report to the CEO or perhaps someone else like the COO, somebody up towards the top. Some organizations don't have a chief information security officer, and they have someone lower, like in the IT department, in charge of security, and that tends to lead to disaster. Because the problem is security things tend to affect your entire business, and if they don't have priority from the top, you typically don't have enough push to accomplish anything. And that's why you take the CISSP certification, quite a lot of it talks about how if you are a low-level worker and you try to implement something in security, you should just give up. You can't get anything done unless you get buy-in from the C level. Somebody way up high must agree with what you're doing and push for it, because it takes resources to implement a security strategy, because you can't just do your little bit better. You have to make other people do their part better. And that means somebody above them has to order them to do it and train them and replace them if they won't do it and all that jazz. You can't make security happen from the bottom. You have to have buy-in from the top. So you have to make a business case and sell security to the higher levels. And if you can't do that, you will not be effective. Anyway.
Because they don't have security briefings. It's like, you're not like the president where every day from the FBI, the NSA, and then
well, that's a big
security briefing saying, oh, these things are happening, and therefore,
Well, it's good that you mention that, because this is why a lot of people got mad at Trump, because he didn't go to the security briefings and he didn't care. And a lot of people gave him a lot of grief for that. And that is a big issue. He really isn't as interested in those security briefings as other presidents have been. Anyway, so the security manager looks only at a tactical level. The security director and vice president and CISO are various people, all of which have some contribution here. But you have to have somebody very powerful pushing your security program, or it won't get very far. So your chief privacy officer, you might have one of these if you really focus on privacy, which is typically because you have in a highly regulated industry like medical, or you have a lot of PII, for personal identifiable information. And then you might have a privacy officer just for this. And by the way, you can get certified as a privacy officer certification. And this is a highly desirable certification leading to a lot of jobs. A lot of people want to hire specific privacy officers, and there are specific certifications to prepare for that. And then, of course, your software development, you've got people at all these different levels. And your database manager, you've got them at all different levels. And your network, you've got an architect at the high level, the engineer, the administrator, and the telecom engineer. This is from top to bottom. You have these layers of people. And same thing for your systems and your storage and your operations. It's an awful lot of management at a big corporation. And each of these people has a certain part of the company that they're responsible for. What's that?
Media manager. I'm like, there's
media. That's the person.
One of the biggest things. Besides data entry is like the boring thing.
Yep.
Media managers. Oh, I missed that Twitter. Oh, sorry.
No, this is media like tapes and hard drives and stuff.
Oh,
where are you storing it, and are you erasing it, and how do you get rid of it? That's handling the physical media.
Because I remember companies have that person that looks at the Twitter.
Oh yes,
that's
like the news media. That's different. That's like public relations. That's not what this is.
Like an analyst or something, wasn't it? Or what's the title for it? What's the name of the title?
That would be
hire someone.
I think public relations. Yeah. Anyway, so then you got security. You got all these different levels. And our security analyst is what we often talk about here. If you will learn Splunk, you'd be a security analyst looking at logs and such, and then there'd be people above you more experienced, and you will have security auditing. And if you get a CISA, you're qualified to be an auditor, and this is a class I'm hoping we'll have here pretty soon. I know Richard Wu could totally teach it, and we got it on the books, but we haven't taught it yet. But CISA is another certification like CISM, which I really think we should be teaching, because they're both about half of the CISSP. They're pretty easy to get, and they will get you to jobs. Both of them prepare you for middle management jobs that are good to have. And being CISA prepares you to be a security auditor, which is a good job. This is where you have to just prove that you're compliant with all these things. And then, of course, you've got help desk, various people levels here from managers down to analysts and the technical support people. And you have quality assurance. These are people that just make sure that you're meeting certain standards. And so everybody has to have certain rules, like everybody has to obey the acceptable use policy, and they show reasonable judgment, including treating people with proper respect and reporting security incidents and so on. This is stuff everybody should have, and this is why you have security awareness training for the whole staff. And you have monitoring responsibilities. You have to be measuring the internal performance of your company. So you have controls which limit what people can do. You have audits to see if people are breaking the rules. You have metrics to see how well they're working. You have 360 feedback, which means you see people from all directions. You get reporting from their superiors, from their underlings, and from their peers to see how they're treating everybody. This is, if you read ancient books like the I Ching, it's all full of this. One very common personality type is a person who is obsequious to the one above them and brutal and cruel to the person under them. This is I see plenty of examples at the college, and that's what this is attempting to find. You're trying to find out if somebody is hated by the people under them, but loved by the people above them. That's a clue that you've got a bad personality type here, and they need to knock that off. And then you can do position benchmarking. You can compare how many people do we have in different roles to other companies that are similar. This is what happened to us in our accreditation disaster. About 7 years ago, the accreditation committee said, we're shutting you down because you don't have enough management. You should have 14 people in senior management, and you only have 4. You don't have as many as the other colleges do, so they had to hire a bunch of people to sit there and pretend to run the place to meet that requirement. But that was precision benchmarking. So you got metrics you can count. Your devices will tell you how many things are blocked by the firewall and how many pieces of malware were found and so on. You can then have business-related metrics like risk indicators, goal indicators, and performance indicators, which are measurements of how much you've achieved your goals. And the thing you would really like is return on investment. This is typically what you have. If you want to open a new location or start an advertising campaign, you say, well, it will cost this much, but it will make this much money, and that's the return. But in security, you typically can't get this number. This is what everyone wants you to have, but the problem is you never got hacked. You spent a lot of money, now you never got hacked. So what's the return on that? It looks like we got nothing. And yet, so in a situation like that, it's hard to, so you're going to have to use an indirect argument. Like you have a responsibility to meet the standards of your industry, there are regulations, or you can be more secure than your competitor and somehow advertise that and get more contracts. You'll have to have some indirect explanation of how this will benefit the company. So here's metrics. Your metrics should be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. This is how you have a good metric that you can measure clearly and that you can use to guide improvements at your company. So there are leading indicators that help you predict the future. There are metrics that have a clear causal relationship to a business impact, so you know they matter. And there are metrics that have influenced decision-making. It's very easy to measure things that don't matter, that waste your time on the measurement and don't help you guide your business. So I've got another set of Kahoots here, and I think that's enough of this for one night, and we'll talk about something else in a minute here. This is 2A2, all right. And my Kahoot is loading. Okay.
Yeah, something funny that you can have on your website, 5 ways to get fired. Police officers who have bad Twitter comments, that's one way to get them fired.
Yes, this is one rule of social media. You're always one tweet from getting fired, although it does not seem to apply to the president.
It also affects medicine. A doctor and a nurse got fired because of saying something that was not.
Oh, yes.
Or the medical community.
A lot of people did. And recently, some state representative candidates started saying overtly racist things, and within a day, they'd ready to withdraw from the race.
That country or whatever that place that you got demoted saying, you have to leave office.
You can only get away with that stuff if you're the president. Which I think it's also, if you're high enough, they can't fire you no matter what you do. It's sort of like having tenure at a college. They really can't do anything to you.
Until he's no longer president.
What's that?
So he can only go to jail after when he gets out of office.
That's right. That's right. But
unless he commits suicide first.
Right. Now, if you actually don't show up, if you don't show up for class at all. Yeah.
Where's that one that committed suicide? The one that everybody's doing.
Oh yeah, a lot of them. That's a common solution. The honorable way out. Anyway, I'll wait another few seconds and then we'll go ahead. All right, 17 is the number. All right. All right, who has a fiduciary duty? That's the board of directors. All right. What process compares job titles with other companies?
Oh, no, they got thoughts.
Yeah, yeah. You can use a cell phone or a laptop. There's always some people that choose not to do it, but it's worth extra credit if you win. That's benchmarking, comparing you to a similar company. All right. And who appoints the CEO? That's the board of directors. All right. And what's the T in SMART? Okay, that's timely, a desirable feature of a metric. So, CAP and MDOT. All right, well, let's take a 10-minute break, and then I want to talk about China, something completely different. So I'm going to stop the video and restart it. So let me figure out how to stop recording.